Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, ensuring you leave no stone unturned for these upcoming MMA events, covering 20 different promotions from all over the world. Not to mention, we just surpassed 5,100 fighter profiles for you to browse through and ensure you have as many direct links as possible for their past fights so you know what to expect when they step foot in the cage this coming weekend. It's a great service. We have surpassed the 110 subscriber mark as well, and you can try it out for free with a 7-day free trial. Link for that in the description below. Don't got to spend a dime to see what the service is and how valuable it can be, especially if you enjoy predicting fights, breaking them down, whether you're a coach, analyst, predictor, handicapper, fighter even. This is a great service for you to help get prepared on opponents or even checking out your own videos if you want to see what you're doing wrong and what you're doing right. So make sure you guys check it out. Once again, that is the MMA Fight Archive. Finally got some video back. I know a lot of you are happy about that, and it looks way too bland for my liking, especially knowing the type of effort I normally put into the visual aspects of the podcast. So I do appreciate you guys bearing with me in that regard. Finally got the mic set up, got the cam going, and made it look presentable enough with what I got to work with. But over the next coming weeks, we'll slowly be adding to it and making it look a little bit better, sprucing it up and all. But, it's been a very long, 3 weeks or so with this whole move and all to get things back in place and try to get back into that routine and that rhythm of dropping content the day that you guys are normally expecting it to come out. And this will be the first day that we finally get the UFC breakdowns out on a Sunday. So, very happy about that in terms of being back on schedule with that. And again, for me, it's more so just continuing to spruce up the background here and just the look of the podcast. But the first thing that we needed to do was to get the video going again. And I'm happy to be able to do that for you guys. Again, I don't like it. I don't like how it looks, but I'm glad I got the framing right. Just got to get the rest of the decorative stuff up. And once I, am able to get my hands on those things, then they'll be able to get up there and make it look just as nice as the former studio that I was in. So appreciate you guys bearing with me in regards to that. All right, with that out of the way now, we're going to be talking about UFC 315, which is the UFC's first trip back to Montreal, Quebec, Canada in over 10 years. The last time they were in town was April of 2015, where they brought a flyweight headliner where we had Demetrius Johnson submit Kyoji Horiguchi in the final second of that 5-round fight with an armbar. And then in the co-main event, we had Rampage Jackson taking on Fabiano Maldonado. I don't know if many of you guys remember Maldonado, but that guy was an absolute scrapper as well. So, pretty mediocre, lackluster card, if we're being honest, in terms of star quality there. For this one, a little bit better in terms of entertainment value and some titles on the line as well. Not just one, but we got two. In the co-main event, we got the women's flyweight queen, Valentina Shevchenko, looking for her first successful title defense after winning the title back from Alexa Grasso back in September. And she takes on her French opponent here, who might be having a bit of a hometown crowd vibe, considering it taking place in Quebec. And she's going to be taking on Manon Fiorot, who has not lost a fight since her first professional fight and has been streaking ever since, and now gets this opportunity to take on Shevchenko. And then in the main event, we got the welterweight title on the line as Belal Muhammad looks to successfully defend his welterweight title for the first time after winning it against Leon Edwards back in July. This time around, he takes on Jack Della Maddalena, who is benefiting from a few weird scenarios and situations. If you guys remember, Belal was supposed to fight back in December against Shavkat Rakhmonov. Injury to Belal pulled him out. They tried getting him for this date as well, but Shavkat is now nursing an injury. So Jack Della Maddalena, who's coming back, I believe, after a surgery or at least an infection stemming from a surgery, hasn't competed since March. He's going to be getting his title shot here, looking to get that title away from Belal Muhammad. Jose Aldo also on the card, going up against a streaking Ayman Zahabi. Fun fight. Or fun card all around, some things here and there for everybody. And obviously your usual dose of Canadian talent that is going to be on the card here as well. Charles Jourdain, absent, although this is taking place in his neck of the woods. Maybe they put together a short notice spot for him, but it's getting a little too short on time for him to do that. All right, let's quickly do the lock of the night and dog of the night recap for this past weekend's UFC Des Moines card. We do go 2-0 for lock of the night plays. We had PFL on Thursday, and I think I got away with one there with Oleg Popov, but considering my luck with the lock of the night play this year, I'll take it. So Popov cashes for us, I believe, as a minus 245 favorite there. And then this past weekend for UFC Des Moines, Montel Jackson cashes for us in a relatively tepid-paced fight. I expected him to starch Daniel Marcos pretty quickly, but got the job done regardless. 30-27 on all scorecards. No way Daniel Marcos was going to finagle his way or weasel his way into a split decision victory there, as he's done in a few prior fights. So that now increases our record to 18-19 on the year for lock of the night plays, for a 49% hit rate, a 3% bump from where we were at before, and momentum finally on our side for the lock of the night play. Hopefully that continues to go in the right direction. The dog of the night play did not come to fruition for us, as we had Ryan Loder for the UFC card. I can't recall the PFL one off the top of my head. Actually, it was Abraham Babley. Split decision loss to former UFC fighter Rodrigo Nascimento. It is what it is. And then Ryan Loder, his chin was holding up a little bit, couldn't really get to his wrestling, and I very much underrated Bukauskas' striking advantage. I knew he had a striking advantage, but I didn't think he'd be able to get to Loder enough before Loder was able to get a hold of him and try to slow things down, which he was kind of successful in doing after originally getting hurt. But then Bukauskas really felt the end near, so he just poured on the pressure a little bit more, and he was able to get the finish there. So we go 0-2 on dog of the night plays, but that's not really the problem, right? We're 22-20 now for a 52% hit rate on the dog of the night play. It's fine, right? Dog of the night plays, you're hitting at 50% or even below, a little bit below 50%. You're still profiting. So I'm happy with that. But again, we'll try to get back on track with the dog of the night play for this coming weekend. All right, we got 11 fights as of this recording scheduled for this UFC 315 card. We did lose Joel Alvarez against Benoit Saint Denis. I don't know if it was an injury to Joel, but he was the one that was forced to pull out of that fight. I'm hearing rumblings that Mateusz Rombeski is going to be the replacement for Benoit Saint Denis, which would be a great matchup in terms of two very aggressive grapplers. And if that fight ends up coming to fruition, or if any fight comes to fruition here for Benoit Saint Denis, I'll be sure to drop another breakdown video strictly for that matchup whenever that fight gets announced and we get some odds that we can actually talk about it. So again, I got you guys covered in regard to that. It will probably be later on this week whenever that matchup gets confirmed and we get odds for it. So stay tuned for that. So like I said, 11 fights that we got scheduled for this UFC 315 card. And we start off in the bantamweight division as we got Canadian Brad Katona coming in at plus 155, going up against Beksat Almakhan, who comes in at minus 180. Now, on the Katona side, I believe he's been somewhat underperforming since coming back to the UFC. He had a great run on the regional scene after originally getting cut from the promotion, gets thrown into the Ultimate Fighter, wins that show, beating the likes of Timur Valiev, and then having that war against Cody Gibson in the finals back in August of 2023. But since then, he is now 1-2. The one fight that he won, he was a minus 600 favorite against Jesse Butler and absolutely squashed him over the course of 15 minutes. He had a loss to Garrett Armfield where I thought he had a little bit of a fight IQ slip up and just really didn't push the pace enough. And then the Gene Matsumoto fight, that was the last one for him. Very close fight. I thought you could have made an argument that he could have won rounds 1 and 3, but the optics of the blood on Katona really didn't look that great. Hence why I believe the judge's ended up scoring that round in Matsumoto's favor and handing Katona another loss. Katona is still one of the better fighters in the bantamweight division, in my opinion. He's very well-rounded, has an educated striking game, very good grappling game with great scrambles, and a great cardio game to fuel whatever approach that he feels he needs to game plan against his opponents and execute it as well. Great fight IQ, in my opinion. I feel like he has a meter in his head, feeling where he might be behind in certain spots and where he needs to really make up, some offense or some damage. He does a great job in terms of getting that back. And like I said, his cardio usually allows him to go a hard 15, even 25 minutes when we saw him fight for a title on the regional scene. He's going up against Beksat Almakhan here, who was 17-1 when coming into the UFC, but now his record reads 11-2. Now, obviously, that second loss being at the hands of Umar Nurmagomedov in his UFC debut. Kind of a very tough fight to come into in your first UFC matchup. But Tapology has categorized 6 of his wins as modified MMA rules, so it doesn't technically count towards his mixed martial arts record, which is why it's come down to 11-2 now. He's 27 years old, strong wrestler, just above average striking. His level of competition on the regional scene was, it was okay, but I think we saw, the beating that he suffered at the hands of Umar Nurmagomedov is a perfect reason, or at least example of what happens when guys come into the promotion and they don't have the experience against these higher levels of competition to really be successful. And I think it really showed in that Almakhan fight, or say that Nurmagomedov fight. Here against Katona, I like me some Katona. At plus 155, you're getting a decent line here on Katona to go out there and implement his style, which I think will be very successful. Almakhan will likely look to get this fight into the grappling range, but I don't think he'll be all that successful with it. Like, his control is not the greatest. I think we've seen him control guys for, a minute, 2 minutes at a time, and then guys are able to work back to their feet and then start to get to their own offense. And I think Katona will be a little bit more immediate and a little bit more efficient in terms of making those scrambles, getting the better of those scrambles, and either enjoying top position of his own or working back into the striking realm where I feel he'll have enough of advantage. And I believe his fight IQ will end up being the difference maker here. So I get Katona has kind of been underperforming in his last few fights, but I feel this is a very winnable fight for him, especially against the guy in Almakhan who's still trying to settle in to this level of competition that he's going up against. So I'll go Katona here. Katona by decision. And again, you're getting him at plus 155, so no need to get greedy with the prop here. All right, fun matchup next here as we have featherweights Jung Young Lee coming in at plus 120, going up against Daniel Wildcat Santos, who comes in at minus 140. Now, Lee was originally scheduled to fight Canadian Gavin Tucker, but an injury to Tucker has forced him out of that matchup, and Lee luckily still gets to stay on the card, and the UFC did a great job in terms of bringing in a guy like Daniel Santos to replace him so that we can get a potential fight of the night type of performance out of these guys. Now, starting off on the Lee side of things, he won the road to UFC, was able to win his UFC debut against Blake Builder, where he showcased great takedown defense and a superior striking approach, which is often the key to his victories in a lot of fights. Last time around, I think he got a little too carried away against a guy in Haider Emil, who's a hurricane. Just as his nickname kind of indicates, this guy usually applies a lot of pressure with his grappling, but he usually implements a bit of a chaotic striking style to set up the rest of his takedowns behind it. And I think Lee kind of got sucked into that a little bit more than he should have. But to his defense, Lee cracked Emil a few times, and Emil, you could see his head pop back, you could see possible damage, and maybe even Lee sensing that Emil was rocked after a couple of those shots, and that's why he got dragged into that just back and forth slugfest, which ultimately ended up with Emil landing bigger shots and getting that TKO victory over the Korean Tiger. I still think Lee, very skilled, very talented, 29 years old, has an aggressive BJJ game if he finds himself on his back, but it's been his defensive grappling that has impressed me a lot, especially through his road to UFC run. We're constantly seeing him work back to his feet when he gets taken down, and then from there he's able to get to his striking, which is where he often has an advantage over a lot of his opponents. He strikes very well, throws combinations together very well, and I think his sense of timing and range management will only continue to improve as he gets, these steps up in competition. Now he's going up against Daniel Santos, who currently rides a 2-fight winning streak after dropping his UFC debut at the hands of Julio Arce. Last time around, he was able to shut down the game of Johnny Munoz Jr., who constantly pulled guard to try to get himself into a winning position, considering the BJJ black belt that he had. But Santos was able to shut that down, ride out that top control, and land big damage from the top position. It's also been close to 2 years since we've seen Santos in action. He's been scheduled 3 times since, but he was the one forced to pull out of each matchup each time. But this is a guy that normally likes to utilize a very aggressive striking style. Training out of the Shoot to Box Diego Lima camp alongside the likes of Marco Tulio and Charles Oliveira, you can expect pure aggression and Muay Thai from these guys, but Santos has a decent grappling game if that's something that he needs to rely on as well. I think that it's his aggressive striking approach which often gets him his victories, and seeing him try to, dust off just dust off the layoff here is going to be very interesting, especially against a guy like Jung Young Lee, who's going to probably be the sharpest striker. If Lee learned from his last matchup against Emil, it will favor him very well in this matchup, where he should be able to just pinpoint, land those strikes, be very accurate, utilize his counter-striking game to thwart the aggressive approach of Daniel Santos. I think that's where we'll see Lee actually get the head up here on Santos. We're seeing some love come in on Lee. When I studied this the other day, he was closer to plus 160. Now he finds himself down to plus 120, and I think people are getting privy to that line, hence why that line is starting to come down. And I think we see Lee constantly landing the bigger shots on Santos, meeting him with nice counters, maybe even mixing in the grappling game a little bit to try to thwart that aggression of Santos. But I think ultimately Lee puts together a good enough body of work to end up winning this fight on the scorecards and pulling off the upset once again. So back-to-back dogs to kick off this UFC card, at least in my opinion. All right, next up, middleweights going at it here, and probably the, flakiest fight on the card in terms of being confident on either side. Now, middleweights, like I said, going at it here as we have Canadian Marc-Andre Barriault coming in at minus 145, going up against Bruno Silva, who comes in at plus 125. Now, starting off on the Barriault side of things, he is currently on a 3-fight losing streak, with 2 of those losses coming by knockout, and it did not look that great. The loss to Joe Pyfer was quickly with him trying to bounce back, just a few months later against Dustin Stoltzfus, and we saw Stoltzfus quickly put him away in that first round. Barriault was trying to fend off the grappling from Stoltzfus early in that fight after being thrown off balance, and then Barriault, getting into that berserker mode once he gets back to his feet, left his chin a little bit too exposed, and Stoltzfus was able to land a cracker of a right hook to drop him and eventually finish him there. Barriault, 35 years old now, so things are slowly starting to come to a close, and it seems like something that he used to rely on a lot is starting to deteriorate. And that's his durability. He just can't eat shots as cleanly as he used to, hence why he's getting knocked out more often than not as of late. When he's not getting knocked out, that's when he's more productive. That's when he is a guy that can actually implement his minute-winning style and be successful with it. Often when fights end up hitting the cards or even going into the third round, he's the one that ends up getting his hand raised because he's continuously pressuring. He's continuously looking to break his opponents, whether it's in the clinch or constant forward movement, and then really turning it up in the latter half of fights because he has the cardio to do so. But again, relying on that durability because he's had to eat some shots in the past to try to get off on his game, and now it's not really working out for him too much. It's very hard to muster up the confidence to try to back him, especially when he's fighting a power puncher like Bruno Silva. Now, things have been not going the greatest for Silva either, who started his UFC career 3-0, but now rides a horrendous 1-6 run over his last 7 fights, and he's actually riding a 4-fight losing streak as well, with 3 of those 4 coming by decision. So he's still there in some of these fights, but we're seeing very gun-shy, a very timid version of Silva compared to what we've seen in the past. And he actually came out in an interview after his last loss to Ismail Nardiev, where he was talking about, I just have this ultra anxiety in the cage that it causes me to gas out sooner than I am or than I should. And then I'm not able to get to my power striking approach, allowing opponents to kind of start just dictating the pace and, starting to cruise a little bit more as fighters get into deep water. Ismail Nardiev, that was a perfect example. Silva said after that first round, I felt like my heart was coming out of my mouth because I was just breathing so heavily and I was just so anxious and just had all this anxiety that I was dealing with. So that's where we saw Nardiev really start to pull away in that fight, landing his takedowns, getting the control time, and you just saw a very deflated version of Silva. Now, it's one thing to acknowledge that, and it's one thing to talk about it, and it's another thing to try to go out there and remedy that. Because this guy's not a rookie by any sense, right? This guy's not a prospect. He's 35 years old. He's coming into his 36th professional MMA fight, and he fought some very tough competition even before coming to the UFC. So seeing him on this run as of late is very weird. Maybe he's just very low on himself, but I'm hoping that with him recognizing this and talking about it, it will allow him to flow a little bit more freely inside the cage once he steps foot in it this weekend. And if he can land that big shot on Barriault here, things could get really sticky for the Canadian. So this is a fight that could go one of two ways. Either Barriault gets to his mini-winning style and he's able to evade enough of the big shots of Silva, and Silva's too anxious inside the cage once again, and we see Barriault grind this fight out or even get a late stoppage. Or Silva shows the fuck up and actually stuffs a few of these takedowns, gets to his pressure, lands the big punches, and ends up knocking out Barriault. I'm going to lean with the latter here. I think Barriault's style it's great and all, but if he can't implement it without eating a few clean shots, it's very hard to get behind, especially with him as a slight favorite here. So I'm going to lean Silva and hope that he's able to land that big shot. With all that said, this is a prediction show. This is me trying to give you as accurate of a prediction on all of these matchups every single week. I don't have uber confidence in this. I'm being forced to give you guys a pick here, and I'm going to go with Bruno Silva. I'm going to go Bruno Silva by knockout, but I'd be very wary in terms of putting money on this matchup, no matter which side of the fence you end up falling on. All right, moving up a division here, we're going to go to the light heavyweight division where we got streaking prospect Navajo Stirling coming in at minus 310, going up against Ivan Erslan, who comes in at plus 260. Now, starting off on the Stirling side of things, who's currently at a 6-0 record now, very surprised and still stunned that he was unable to put away Tuco Tokos last time around and going the full 15 minutes, winning it very dominantly, or at least very convincingly, I should say. But not able to get a guy like Tukos out of there. Very concerning for a guy with the type of hype, the type of prospect he is, the type of striking he has, and what we've seen Tuco Tokos come up short against in the past. Very weird that Stirling was unable to get that finish there. He's still 27 years old. Maybe that 15 minutes of experience will help him moving forward. But I think that obviously very high-level striker training alongside the likes of Israel Adesanya, Carlos Ulberg, very clean striker coming from a kickboxing background. Obviously, you can see that on full display when he's throwing his big strikes and his combinations. He's educated, has the cardio to go 15 as he showed last time around. His defensive grappling very much improved, which will lead to him, being more effective in the striking realm, especially when he's forced to defend a few takedowns and then get back to his striking after that. I like what we see with Stirling. The kid looks like he has all the goods. He looks like he's just a younger version of Carlos Ulberg pretty much, and just as effective as well. Now he's going up against Ivan Erslan, who is looking to bounce back after losing his UFC debut at the hands of Iwan Cutelaba. Erslan had previously fought for KSW, trained out of the Zagreb branch of American Top Team, and then once he got signed to the UFC, moved across the pond, started training at the headquarters of American Top Team. Great training partners, great head coaches, but he really couldn't get it done against Iwan Cutelaba last time. We saw him struggle in the first round. I believe it was the third round where he got the best work off, but Cutelaba had done enough work in the first 2 rounds to end up winning that fight. I don't know what judge or why that first judge ended up scoring that first round for Erslan. I thought it was clear that Cutelaba had won it. But Erslan, power puncher, a guy that highly relies on that power to try to get his wins. He's won 11 of his 14 fights have come by finish, with his last 9 wins coming by knockout in the first round. So that's largely how he relies on fights. Fights that go past that first round mark usually ends up losing, either getting grinded out or even just landing big, his opponents landing big shots and getting him out of there as well. He's 33 years old, seems to have some power in his hands, but he doesn't really jump off the page in terms of one specific thing here. Now, against Stirling, he's going to look to try to get this fight to the ground. I think he might throw a couple big shots early to try to get that respect from Stirling, but if he's unable to get the respect, then things will start to really slow down for him, and I think that's where we'll see him start to get to his grappling and look to utilize his physicality to really wear Stirling down and try to get the upper hand there. Erslan will be at a 2-inch height disadvantage as well as a 7-inch reach disadvantage, and that just really is not going to fare well for him here. I think Stirling has the youth advantage, the speed advantage, the technical striking advantage, and I think that his takedown defense will be good enough to shut down any approach that Erslan tries to take in that realm. This leads me to believe that Stirling will end up getting that knockout probably in the first or second round as Erslan starts to make some mistakes, maybe crashes the pocket too recklessly here and gets ended up countered here by Stirling. But I really like Stirling in the spot. He's jumped from minus 270 to about that minus 310 range in the last 24 hours, and it seems like he might end up closing closer to minus 400 come fight time. But I do like Stirling to get his hand raised by knockout. All right, another light heavyweight matchup here where we got Modestas Bukauskas coming in at minus 115, going up against Iwan Cutelaba, who comes in at minus 105. Now, I'll start off on the Bukauskas side of things, who's now 4-1 since returning to the UFC, and he continues to look better every single time out, especially with his last 2 wins coming by finish. The first of those 2 was a submission victory over Marcin Prachnio, who he was beating over the course of 2.5 rounds until he finally got that position on the ground to lock up that submission. Then in his last fight against Rafael Cerqueira might be the worst fighter that's ever stepped foot inside the UFC cage, as both of his fights have been him getting bull rushed immediately and finished by his opponents, and Bukauskas took the exact same approach, getting the job done within 2.5 minutes there. Now, Bukauskas has clearly improved from the first time that we saw him in the UFC. I think he was 1-3 in his first 4 fights with the UFC. That win against Andreas Michailidis, where he hurt him very badly at the end of the first round. Then somebody opened the cage as Michailidis was getting back to his feet, and he kind of just stumbled backwards, and the referee was like, all right, we're done. He's too hurt. He should not continue. But now he's getting legitimate victories, right? The Tyson Pedro one, the Zach Paunga one, the aforementioned Prachnio and Cerqueira fights. He's getting better every single time out, and it helps that he's very much entrenched in the improvements that he's trying to make as well. Like the guys that he's training with, the Tyson Pedro, or sorry, not the Tyson Pedros. I was looking at Tyson Pedro's name. That's why I said it. The Tom Aspinalls, the Simeon Powells, the Anti Delias as well. This guy's really mixing it up over there on the European side of things, and you're seeing that confidence grow in him as he continues to work through the UFC light heavyweight division. Now he's going up against Iwan Cutelaba, who's probably has some high level confidence at the moment as well. This is another 2-fight winning streak he's on, and it's been something that he's never been able to get surpassed through his 19-fight UFC career. He always stumbles in that 3rd fight looking for that 3rd straight victory. Last time around against Ibo Aslan, he was able to deal with that early finishing power of Aslan, eventually getting a level change and getting the fight to the ground and working to a submission position where he was able to get the tap. And even the Ivan Erslan fight where he was able to just get to his game, mix it up well enough, his power punching to his wrestling. And I think that's where he's been able to, where he's often struggled to try to mend that bridge, try to get that gap together a little more between his power punching approach and his wrestling approach. And the other factor here is his cardio, being able to mix those things together well enough before he ends up gassing himself out and he doesn't have the energy to actually do it effectively. So either he's looking to headhunt against most of these opponents. If that fails, then he looks for his takedowns. If that fails, then we see him start to run out of gas and end up losing like he did against Philippe Lenz, or even getting knocked out like he did against Kennedy and Zetchiku. Fun fight in terms of a stylistic clash here, but I really like the Bukauskas side. Like, I think he is the better fighter overall. I think his durability should be good enough. I know he got knocked out by Vitor Petrino a few fights back, but I think he has the overall MMA game kind of under wraps here. Like, this is a guy that can strike from distance and then engage in the clinch, or even look to get this fight to the ground, where he could find some moments to just regain his consciousness if he gets hit very badly or gets rocked. This is a great fight for Bukauskas, in my opinion. I think that we're getting him at -115 is a great line. I think we saw him drop to about +105 about 24 hours ago. Now the love coming back in on Bukauskas. I get it. Cutelaba's looked good as of late, but I think against a complete fighter like Bukauskas, he'll likely end up struggling. So give me Bukauskas here. I think Bukauskas outpoints, outworks, and just out MMA's Ion Cutelaba here en route to a decision victory. All right, moving over to the women's flyweight division now, where we got Jessica Andrade coming in at +250, going up against streaking Canadian contender, I guess you can categorize her now, Jasudavicius, who comes in at -300. Starting off on the Jessica Andrade side of things here now, she's coming off of a decision loss against Natalia Silva in a fight that ended up winning Fight of the Night honors. Now, Andrade is a former strawweight champion and a multiple-time title challenger, often because of her just staying in that top 5 range for 2 divisions as well. This is a fighter similar to Kevin Holland, who likes to jump between welterweight and middleweight. Andrade loves to jump between strawweight and flyweight, but I think we often see worse performances from her when she goes to flyweight, where she's often the undersized woman. In this specific matchup, she's going to be giving up 6 inches in height as well as 6 inches in reach, and I think that might end up coming into play here pretty evidently. But Andrade, we know her style. She likes to crash the pocket recklessly, throw big winging hooks, which can, play out for her very well, like it did against Mackenzie Dern 2 or 3 fights ago, or even nullifying any type of grappling control that her opponents are able to get if she's able to just land a few big shots and hurt her opponents. She has some decent wrestling as well, which we've seen her be able to get some takedowns and have some good top control. She has a nasty submission game, just as she showed against Amanda Lemos. Nothing like super, nothing with a lot of finesse, but like a lot of power submissions where she can kind of just squeeze the life out of her opponents if she's able to get a good enough position in some of these spots. She's 33 years old, fighting the highest level of women competition that you could possibly get into UFC, and constantly accruing that experience. But one thing with that as well, we are seeing where her ceiling is. Getting knocked out by Yan Xiaonan, getting submitted by Tatiana Suarez, getting outstruck by Natalia Silva. But it's really going to be the grappling where she will end up coming up short in these flyweight matchups. And she's facing a very tough grappler here in Jasudavicius, who's looking to add a 5th straight victory to her record. Now, last time around, we saw her dominate former bantamweight title challenger Mayra Bueno Silva, constantly landing takedowns. I believe she landed 3 takedowns, and because that's all she needed, because Silva was unable to work back to her feet after that. Jasudavicius is a very solid top pressure fighter. She establishes her top control very well. Her submission defense is on point. We've seen her in some tight spots, and she's able to work out of those things or those positions. And her striking is slowly improving, that she can mix in the striking a little bit to mask the takedown entries, because then from there she usually does a great job in terms of just muscling her opponents to the ground. There is some technique to it as well, right? Don't get me wrong. the training camp that she trains out of at Niagara Top Team is a perfect complement to her style. Like she started mixed martial arts at that gym, and they really helped her with the wrestling game. And you can often see that's why she ends up winning a lot of her fights, and why she's able to beat the likes of Fatima Klein and Ariane Lipski and Mauro Bueno Silva. She's 36 years old. I'm glad she's getting this fight now, because it's really now or never, right? She's getting up there in age. She's fighting a former champion here. This will likely put into her number one contender fight if she can get the win. And then from there, maybe she's fighting for a title by mid 2026 or early 2026. It's absolutely possible. But if you guys can't tell already, I am heavily leaning towards Jasudavicius. I think this is a horrible stylistic matchup for Andrade. She might be able to land a few big shots here, but I don't think it's going to be anything that will cause Jasudavicius too many problems. I think it's just a matter of time before Jasudavicius gets a hold of Andrade and drags her to the ground and then just asserts that top position. And I think that this is one of those spots that could replicate how Jessica Andrade ended up losing to Valentina Shevchenko, which, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, Shevchenko was able to establish a crucifix position, landing nasty elbows from that top position until the referee was forced to step in. And I think Jasudavicius can get a similar position. She got it against Mauro Bueno Silva. Now she won't have as much resistance fighting someone smaller like Jessica Andrade. When she's able to establish that top position, I expect her to rain down big shots, and I think she could actually work to a TKO position here. So I really like Jasudavicius here. She was minus 250 when I initially researched this fight, thinking that we'd get some more Andrade love coming in to bring that line down, but she's jumped up to minus 300 now, and she might even start to run away with it a little bit more here and get into that minus 350 range. So I don't mind parlaying Jasudavicius, but I will be targeting her TKO prop and maybe even the under 2.5 in case she gets a submission spot that she could possibly take advantage of as well. But I like Jasudavicius, and the official prediction will be her to win by TKO. All right, fun welterweight matchup next here as we have Mike Malott coming in at minus 235 going up against Charles Radtke, who comes in at plus 200. Now, starting off on the Mike Malott side, he was able to successfully bounce back after that very unfortunate loss at the hands of Neil Magny, a fight that he was seconds away from winning on the scorecards. He ended up gassing out too hard, and Neil Magny was able to muster up a finish there and get the stoppage in the last minute of that fight. But Mike Malott made it a point last time around against Trevin Giles in November, where he took a little bit more of a methodical and calculated approach rather than looking for a finish right off the bat, which is how he had won all of his previous fights. With him just being a little bit more methodical, picking his spots with the striking, trying to mix it in with the grappling a little bit more too. He showed that he can go 15 minutes and he can manage his gas tank well enough, especially against a guy like Trevin Giles, who is a veteran of the game. I was very impressed with what we saw from Mike Malott now there, but just like Iwan Cutelaba, this is a guy that's going to have to figure out how to manage his aggressiveness, which was a big shining part of his game on the come up, and that ability to manage his gas tank, that in case guys don't go away so easily, can he go the full 15 minutes and be just as successful and just as effective? And he is a very smart guy. You know, he's done commentating gigs in the past. He was a coach for a very long time at Team Alpha Male, but once he found that fire to get back into the mixed martial arts cage, that's where we saw some of that that start to translate to his performances. But I think he really needed that fight against Neil Magny to slow things down a little bit, right? It seemed like the UFC was strapping a jetpack to him and hoping that he would be the next Canadian great hope. But Magny brought him back down to earth a little bit. And I think we're going to continue to see that slow and gradual improvement in his overall mixed martial arts game. Nasty jiu-jitsu game, nasty Muay Thai. Now it's about just putting it all together and managing the gas tank well enough so that he can be successful. Now he's going up against a guy in Charles Radtke who's likely going to push him here and try to keep him from being able to manage his gas tank. Now Radtke is a training partner of the man headlining this card, welterweight champion Belal Muhammad, and he's showing some improvements and some better side of his game at this stage of his career. Last time against Matthew Summelsberger, he forced Summelsberger into a bit more of a pocket exchange than I was expecting, and he was able to get this finish about 51 seconds into that first round. Radtke is a very aggressive BJJ black belt, but not with his grappling. more so with his striking and keeping his opponents uncomfortable by forcing them continuously moving forward, landing big shots, and looking to get them out of there. He tried to rely on his BJJ 2 fights ago against Carlos Praches, and that did not work out for him. His wrestling just was not up to snuff, and then we saw Praches eventually land that big shot. I believe it was a body shot that crumpled Radtke and got him out of there. But he's talented, he's aggressive, and I think that will make up for some of the shortcomings he has in his technical striking game and even his lack of wrestling at times. It's just going to be the aggressiveness of continuously moving forward, making opponents uncomfortable, and forcing them to make mistakes. And he might be able to do that here against Mike Malott. Now, with that said, I think Malott is just a sharper fighter here. I think he'll be able to meet the aggressiveness of Radtke and force Radtke to make the mistake, and that could lead to Malott landing a big shot, maybe landing a body shot here that could crumple Radtke, similar to what Carlos Praches was able to do. I like Malott. I think this is a fight that he can actually string together a second straight victory here, countering Radtke effectively. Would I put him at minus 235? Probably not. I'd probably go down to about minus 150. I'd say he'd have closer to a 60% chance of winning this matchup rather than, what 70% the line currently indicates. But violence is probably what I'm going to lean on most here. I think this is a fight, given the styles of both of these guys. I think Radtke continuously pressuring and pushing Malott could cause some car crashes, but I think it'll be Malott who ends up coming out on top here. So I can't choose because, Malott, very dangerous submission specialist as well, but he has some nasty strikings, and I think that's where he's going to have the advantage here over Radtke. So I'm going to go Malott. I'm going to go Malott via TKO probably, and but the fight doesn't go to decision. The under 2.5, those would be where I would try to clip this fight and try to get the better of it. So give me Malott inside the distance. All right, next up, women's flyweight matchup here as we have former champion Alexa Grasso coming in at plus 185, going up against Natalia Silva, who comes in at minus 220. Now, starting off on the Grasso side of things, all 3 of her last fights were against the current champion Valentina Shevchenko. Now, the first one in March of 2023, she was able to get that nasty rear naked choke victory, I believe in the 4th round of their matchup in a very competitive fight, and she was able to pull off a massive upset. The next fight, very wayward scorecard to give Alexa Grasso a 10-8 in one of those rounds, which caused a draw, a split draw, I believe the official result was, which forced another fight with Valentina Shevchenko, which took place at Noche UFC back in September, and we saw the grappling dominance of Valentina Shevchenko come there and absolutely shut down the game of Alexa Grasso. We saw Shevchenko land numerous takedowns, continuously keep her on her back, showcasing good entries and showcasing some of the grappling defense issues that Grasso still may have. Now, from a submission point of view, she's very much improved, right? Coming into the UFC, she was mainly seen as this kickboxing point fighter who just put punches together and try to hurt opponents from distance or at least chip away at them and win on the scorecards. But working with Diego Lopez, obviously building that friendship, that camaraderie has helped her BJJ game, which is why we saw her pull off that submission win against the likes of Joanne Wood and even Valentina Shevchenko. But I think we saw kind of what her kryptonite is. Fighters that can keep her on her back and stay away from her submissions are the ones that are going to be able to nullify her style and completely muzzle her. But if she can flow at range and get into her striking groove, she could possibly have some success depending on the opponent she's going up against. Now, the style that she's going up against here against Natalia Silva is a weird one. This one is one that fighters have not been able to really get a grasp on. Silva's currently on a 6-fight winning streak coming into the UFC and has added another 6-fight winning streak in the UFC, making it a total of 12 straight fights that she's won. She's done a great job in terms of implementing her style. She utilizes a perpetual lateral movement, blitzes forward when she sees the opening to land a couple shots, land a head kick even if she needs to. But it's really just lulling her opponents into her power hand and her power kick and then letting go with those whenever they're least expecting it. She does a great job in terms of getting into the pocket and out of the pocket before eating too much big damage. And the other aspect of her game that she's improved well enough because opponents are going to be looking to attack her in this way is with her grappling. right? She was able to nullify Jasudavicius completely. She was able to nullify Jessica Andrade's takedown attempts. Viviane Araujo had some decent success in the first round, but largely with her clinch and pushing Silva against the cage, she couldn't really get her down. And then Silva was able to get to her game in the second and third rounds. That's her style. And she's still only 28 years old. So we're only going to see her continue to develop and continue to get better. But her current style of just movement, and then crashing the pocket enough that, she's not shutting down opponents by just running away from them completely, but she's engaging enough that the judges constantly see that she's the one landing the bigger shots and then evading most of the damage coming back her way as well. She has an aggressive BJJ game off her back when she does find herself there, but for the most part, it's all about the striking and movement game, and I think that's where Grasso will really start to struggle. I think that will actually cause some frustration from Grasso, and that's going to cause her to make some mistakes in the striking realm, which is where I think that Silva can really land some big shots, counter her down the pipe, walk her onto some big shots as well, but I think Silva's style is going to be very hard for Grasso to grasp. Graspo, maybe something like that. But regardless, I like me some Silva here. She was minus 175 when I researched this fight. She's up to minus 220 now. It seems like the public is jumping on her as well. And this is where sharps might start to get involved and be like, hey, you can't completely dismiss a former UFC champion just because of this new shiny thing that's on the scene. And I think that's where we might see some buyback on the Grasso side. So, I don't know. It's going to be weird to see how many people are willing to play Silva and parlay her and how much that impacts the line compared to Grasso, her experience, her strength of schedule, the fact that she was a champion before, and if people believe she can actually get this fight to the ground. But I'm going to lean with Silva. I'm going to go Silva by decision. I think she outstrikes Grasso here. Might be close early, but I think this starts to get later and later. I think we see Silva start to pull away some more and make it look even more convincing. So give me Silva and Silva by decision. All right, next up. Very fun fight here. Feature bout between Jose Aldo coming in at minus 215, going up against Ayman Zahabi, who comes in at plus 185. Now, starting off on the Aldo side of things, he's coming off one of the most boring fights I think we've ever seen. But if you are ever to shut down Jose Aldo's game, this is how. Mario Bautista did exactly what he needed to do, nullifying Aldo against the cage, constantly pushing him there and keeping him uncomfortable. He was unable to land any takedowns that night. I believe, it was very difficult. I'm very, sorry, let me just get the number here that I have. Yeah, his elite takedown defense. So his last 4 opponents combined are 1 of 33 on takedowns. I think that one opponent that got the takedown was Rob Font. Merab Dvalishvili shut out. But he was still able to win the fight because he constantly pushed the pace and pressure and got that clinch up against the cage. And that's what Bautista looked to replicate. And it was very boring. But he did enough, according to the scorecards, for him to get that win. Aldo was building up some steam in that second round. But once Bautista got to his grappling once again, that's where Aldo really started to get shut down. So I hope we see a little bit more urgency from Aldo if he ever finds himself in those positions again. But one thing he has shown, just as he did in the Rob Font fight, just as he did in the Jonathan Martinez fight, he is still an elite striker. He is a guy that can put nasty Muay Thai combinations together. He can hurt opponents. He almost finished Jonathan Martinez, but it seems like he is fine with just grinding fights out and trying to minimize any risk of getting hit himself. So even when he hurt Martinez, I believe he went to his grappling after that to try to keep Martinez in a defensive position and not in a way that he could possibly counter and rally back with a big comeback shot of his own. Elite takedown defense, nasty striking, still has the power, still has the speed, nasty leg kicks as we always come to expect with Aldo. And I think that this is a perfect stylistic matchup for him going up against a very hot and streaking Ayman Zahabi, who I believe is currently on a 5-fight winning streak. The last of which came against Pedro Munoz in a fight that he just, we know what Munoz's style is, right? He's a hard-nosed striker that doesn't really have much method to his madness rather than just throwing a few leg kicks and throwing big shots. Zahabi was able to traverse the cage well, pick him apart from distance and win that fight on the scorecards. The win against Javid Basharat was the one that was very impressive, considering Basharat was undefeated going into that matchup and seemed like a guy that was destined for title contention. But Zahabi just slowly picked him apart and was able to run away with that matchup. But here against Aldo, I think Zahabi is going to struggle immensely. I think we'll see Aldo really start to pick him apart, landing the bigger shots, getting his kicks going, countering effectively, and I think his speed advantage is going to end up being too much for Zahabi here. Again, I would love to see Zahabi win as a Canadian and, try to pick up the biggest win of his professional MMA career, but I just don't think this is a good stylistic matchup. Zahabi can't out-wrestle him. I don't think Zahabi can outstrike him. He might be able to build a game plan to try to, take advantage of some of the chinks in the armor in Aldo's striking game, but I just don't think it's something that he can come to fruition with. We saw an educated and skilled striker like Jonathan Martinez get absolutely picked apart by Jose Aldo. Even Rob Font got picked apart by Jose Aldo over the course of 25 minutes. I just can't see Zahabi doing that at this stage of his career. So I think we see a classic Aldo performance, plays it somewhat safe, but still very aggressive in terms of landing his combinations and making it look obvious that he's the one that deserves to win the fight. But I do like Zahabi here, and I think I do like Aldo here, and I think he outstrikes Zahabi en route to a decision victory. All right, that now brings us to the first of two title fights on the card, where we got flyweight queen Valentina Shevchenko coming in at plus 145, going up against Manon Fiorot, who comes in at minus 160. Now, Shevchenko is looking to put the trilogy against Alexa Grasso behind her, especially after how dominant of a performance she had against Grasso. She went 8 of 12 on takedowns and controlled over 16 minutes of that 25-minute fight, perfectly mixing in her takedowns behind her striking and then keeping Grasso on her back and just grinding it out. The Sphere card was great. Very entertaining up until that fight, and there was a screeching halt when Shevchenko took the cage there and shut down Grasso, who was obviously being buoyed by that Mexican crowd. Shevchenko, we know her as a great all-around fighter, from her Muay Thai approach with nasty kicks and nasty combinations to her very effective grappling approach, which we've been seeing in this half of her career, where she's able to mix in strong takedowns and then control opponents on the ground, maybe even look for a couple of submission opportunities, but also even getting these dominant spots where she can get those TKO positions. I'm kind of mystified that she's the underdog in the spot. I think a lot of people are reading into her fight with Grasso and saying, oh, she's just desperation takedowns now. But I don't think Fiorot has as much of a knockout threat in the striking realm, and that leads me to believe that Shevchenko might be more content with striking with Fiorot, and I think she can pick and choose which rounds she really wants to start to go for the grappling, and I don't think that this is one where she has to, every single round go desperation takedown and try to keep Fiorot on her back. I think she can be just as successful with having a competitive striking battle in some of these rounds where she could end up getting her hand raised in that way as well. So I think we'll see a really overall mixed martial arts approach here from Shevchenko. Now let's quickly talk about Fiorot before I continue on with the prediction, which I think you guys can already kind of guess as I spill the beans there already. But Fiorot, very impressive performance last time around against Erin Blanchfield. She shut her out on the scorecards. She only allowed Blanchfield to shoot, I believe, 3 takedown attempts. I think Fiorot was the only one to land a takedown in that matchup as well, which was very surprising. But Fiorot comes from a kickboxing background. She has titles under the EFC banner, which I believe is a South African promotion, and UAE Warriors before she ended up coming to the UFC. Her first fight was the only loss she's taken on her record, which was to Leah McCourt in her debut, where she got out wrestled in that fight and lost by split decision. But we've seen constant improvements in her defensive grappling game, and it's obviously buoyed by her constant movement, right? Her range management, her footwork allows her to make it very hard for her opponents to get in on her hips to try to get to takedowns. And then from there, she's able to land some combinations and get back out into range and then just stick to her style, which has been very efficient and very tough to deal with for a lot of fighters. She usually gets close to that 90 significant strike range whenever her fights hit the scorecards. The first time we saw her go 25 minutes in the UFC against Erin Blanchfield, she ended up landing 173 significant strikes. She stayed in perpetual motion, landed strikes from distance, and just outpointed her way to a decision victory that night. So again, this is going to be her toughest fight against Shevchenko, who I believe can be competitive in the striking realm. With the lack of knockout power coming from the Fiorot side of things, I'd kind of be surprised if Shevchenko gets caught with a big enough shot to put her on wobbly legs or cause her to be a desperation or a desperate grappler, just as we've seen in a few of her past fights. But again, I think she'll strike and be competitive with Fiorot there. And then I think we'll see Shevchenko mix in those takedowns when she needs to. And I think from there, that's where we'll start to see her grappling dominance. Fiorot, I have no doubt she'll be able to thwart off some takedown attempts. She might be able to work back to her feet in some of these spots. But the more Shevchenko starts to mix it up and the more she really starts to get Fiorot thinking about what's coming back her way, that's where we'll see Shevchenko be a little bit more successful in terms of establishing her dominance here. Now, I can already see it, I was heavy, or at least very confident in Fiorot in her last matchup against Erin Blanchfield, and I got a lot of shit for it, and she went out there and pretty much swept the scorecards against Blanchfield. Nobody had anything to say after I got that one right. And this one, I can already feel that people are going to be like, what are you saying? Shevchenko is not what she used to be. Look what Grasso was able to turn her into. Fiorot should be able to run away with this matchup, which is what the line is indicating as well. Right, we had Shevchenko closer to plus 115 just a few days ago. Actually, plus 100 when I studied this fight. I believe it was Thursday of last fight week. And now on Sunday, she's at plus 145. So it seems like the public is buying in on the new shining thing on the block. But I think there's, once again, overlooking the Shevchenko thing. It's kind of reminding me of, and I'm guilty of this too. It's reminding me of Tatiana Suarez against Weili Zhang. But with Suarez, we know we had a dominant wrestling type of approach that we can bank on. And Zhang did a good enough job in terms of thwarting that and getting to her own style. Does Fiorot's striking style inspire as much confidence to try to overcome the champion here, who in my opinion is the better overall mixed martial artist? I don't think so. So I got to go Shevchenko here. Shevchenko inside the distance as she puts together good striking, good grappling, good control, and just completely muzzles Fiorot here and wins at least 3 of these 5 rounds. And still, women's flyweight champion Valentina Shevchenko. All right. Main event time now, where we have the welterweight title on the line with Belal, remember the name, Muhammad, coming in at minus 220, looking for his first successful title defense, taking on Australian Jack Della Maddalena, who comes in at plus 185. Quickly, just want to remind you guys, hit that like and subscribe below if you haven't already. Show your boy some support there. Let me know if there's anything that you've already disagreed about. Just want to make that quick plug before I get into the rest of this breakdown here. All right, we'll start off on the Belal Muhammad side, who's riding a solid 9-fight winning streak. Finally got a shot at gold back in July. Was able to get that 10th straight victory, and even more importantly, wrap that UFC gold around his waist. He's 36 years old, and he's clearly become much better than he was earlier on in his UFC career. And a lot of that has come from his newly minted style of not newly minted, but more effective than he has been in the past, with that constant pressure, constant volume, constant pace, and that wrestling. Even, he's doing the whole Anthony Hernandez, Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman type of approach of just keeping pressure, getting these takedowns, mat returning, using strikes that may not be technically the best, but it allows him to keep his opponent's hands busy so he can get that level change and eventually get opponents to the ground. He's very successful. He's very efficient in doing that, which is why he's been able to muzzle all the guys that he's been beating as of late. The Stephen Wonderboy Thompsons, the Vicente Luque, which was a rematch victory for Belal Muhammad, right? Sean Brady, who's been looking like an absolute killer, and even finished Leon Edwards, if I'm not mistaken. Well, I am definitely not mistaken. He finished him a couple months back. We saw Belal Muhammad overwhelm Sean Brady and finish him in the second round of their fight. We saw him completely shut down Gilbert Burns with a broken foot. And then we saw him absolutely, run through Leon Edwards with the exception of a round or so. But Muhammad's style, very difficult to deal with. If his durability continues to hold up, if his cardio continues to hold up, he's going to be very hard to defeat for a lot of fighters. Now, Maddalena could have the style to, have the solution to the problems that Muhammad brings into the cage. Maddalena, very fun fighter. He was down 2-0 on 2 judges' scorecards in his last matchup against Gilbert Burns. And then he was able to utilize his cardio advantage to really muster up that finish against Burns in the last minute and a half of the third round. And that's kind of how I broke down that fight going into it. I was very heavy on the Maddalena side that night. I did expect him to showcase a little bit better defensive grappling in the first 2 rounds. I expect him to possibly lose at least one of those rounds, but I didn't expect him to lose 2 of those rounds. But luckily, kept the judges out of it, was able to get that third round finish and really get Burns out of there. Nasty striker, very technical, does a great job in terms of mixing up the targets when he throws his combinations, mixing it to the body, opening up opportunities to the head. The way that he dismantled Randy Brown to eventually submit him was absolutely phenomenal. The Kevin Holland fight was kind of close, but it's really been the defensive grappling that has burned Maddalena in the past, even in fights that he ended up winning. And we know that's going to get harder to do as he climbs the ladder. And now he's at the top of the ladder fighting a guy like Belal Muhammad, who's clearly going to be looking to expose that side of Maddalena's game. Burns went 5 of 5 through the first 10 minutes on takedowns there, right? And then he went 2 of 6 in the final round, and we know that his cardio issue there caused him to not complete those other 4 takedown attempts. Maddalena's apparently been working with Craig Jones for this matchup because he knows he's going to be looking to get grappled by Belal here. So maybe he tries to catch Belal in a choke, or tries to utilize his defensive BJJ to create scrambles so that he can work back to his feet, because it's clear that he has the technical striking advantage. But it's just the constant pressure and forward movement of Muhammad that's going to cause that frustration for Maddalena. This is a good test for Belal, but I think it's still one that he ends up passing pretty convincingly. I think those holes in Maddalena's defensive grappling game will end up showing themselves. He might be able to showcase good takedown defense in the first 2 rounds, but that constant pressure and footwork and movement of Muhammad, that cardio game, pushing the gas when he really needs to in deeper water, that's where we're going to see Maddalena start making those little mistakes. That will allow Muhammad to complete those takedowns and either keeping Maddalena on his back or continuously mat returning him, where he can eventually, really enjoy some top control and just grind this fight out. It might be ugly, it might be boring, it might be grindy, but that's what Belal Muhammad has been good at throughout his career, and he's at the best stage of his career right now, showcasing what he's been showcasing as of late. So I got to go Muhammad here. I love me some Maddalena. I'd love to see Maddalena win this fight just as a fan, but in terms of just breaking this fight down from a predictions perspective, I like some Muhammad here. I think he grinds on Maddalena, and I think he wins this fight on the scorecards, and still welterweight champion Belal Muhammad. There you guys go. Full card breakdown for UFC 315. We're back on camera as well, so hopefully you guys are able to appreciate that. Again, just doesn't look the way that you guys are used to seeing it as of yet, but I promise over the next coming weeks, as I get more of my stuff back, I'll be able to make this look just as nice as it has in the past, and get out of this goddamn dining chair. I've been forced to use a dining chair the past 2 weeks because I don't have my computer chair as of yet, but that will be coming sooner than later, and then I can be comfy again. So once again, I appreciate you guys. Drop that like, drop that subscribe, drop a comment. Let me know what you guys think about the picks, what you guys might be disagreeing upon. I'd love to chat about it in the comment section below. And yeah, I do quickly want to say we have a few other events this week. PFL MENA kicks off their season on Friday, LFA 208 on Friday, KSW 106, PFL Europe 1. All of that is going down this week as well. I'll have video breakdowns for LFA and PFL Europe on the YouTube channel, so don't worry about that. But PFL MENA and KSW will strictly be broken down in written form on the MMALOTN Patreon page. So if you want to get access to that, check the link in the description below for all the degenerate plays, parlays, props, written breakdowns, in-depth analysis on some of these matchups. I got you covered all on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. Check the link in the description below for that. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow for the top 3 Lock of the Night candidates for UFC 315. See you guys then. Peace.
Last thing.